So this is the fashionable waterfront development at Barry. These days full of boutiques and bars and restaurants and supermarkets and hotels and fashionable, desirable residences. The kind of place where the cool cats want to be. However, in 1978, when I was 10 years old, what was here then was far cooler. So at its height, this yard stretched right the way across the docks you see around us here and contained at least 600 locomotives. It was a vast enterprise. And when I made a short note on social media, letting people know that I was going to be making this program and asking for their personal experiences, it would seem from the responses that I got that pretty much everybody who grew up in and around Barry in the 1970s used to come down here to look at the locomotives, to play on the locomotives, because there were no fences or anything to stop you, and has some kind of a fond memory of what Die Woodham's yard meant to them. The people who reached out were the family themselves and people who worked at the scrapyard as well. So in tonight's episode we should be hearing from a host of different people. So let them introduce themselves to you.
I'm Paul Woodham. I'm the eldest son.
I'm Sally, second daughter of Die Woodham.
Netta, I was the Dai's wife.
Shirley Gutted. I worked with him 55 to 1994.
Brilliant.
And I still got the letter, or it's a with compliment slip.
Yeah.
I should have looked at it from him when I actually left work, and it was just enjoy your retirement, Shirley.
And finally, keeping it all together, our resident expert.
Hi, my name is Gavin Douglas. I'm a retired vicar, and like many clergy, I have a passionate interest in trains. And recently I've been brushing up on the Barry Scrapyard and Die Woodham.
So let's go back right to the very beginning. What were the origins of this yard?
Well, actually, it's a business that goes back to really the opening of the docks here, in which I think were opened something like
1890, I think.
1898.
Yeah. And
in I think 1895, Woodham Brothers was established by Die Woodham's grandfather. Die Woodham himself was born in 1919, and he inherited the business in when his dad retired and when he was demobbed in 1947. And he immediately reorganized the business into 4 areas. They were big contractors. When they first set up, they were into the recycling of rigging, ropes, what they call dunnage, what used to pack cargoes and separate cargoes, and scrap metal. So they were into recycling very early on in the 19th century. And there was a transport business. There was an organization that moved heavy kit around the docks, plant and machinery and stuff like that, and the scrap business and the recycling business. So it was broken up into 4 divisions, and scrap rapidly became the biggest part.
Away,
Yeah,
right?
well, on the ships.
Jump ship at Barry Docks.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then his father, who he's not in this picture, we have got a picture of him in there. It was his company, and then my father took it over from there with his. They had 3 brothers, wasn't it, that were in the business for him. Because this picture is Thompson Street in Barry, where the business started.
Right. And in those days, that was before your father?
Yeah. Well, my father would have been a young boy in this.
Yeah.
But and then obviously my father took it over, and his brothers were also in the firm as well. But my father ran it.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. But it was his father's company. I
So-
think his name is Alfred. We didn't know him because he died years before we were born.
Right.
It was called Woodham and Sons,
Yeah,
and then
Woodham and
later
Sons.
it became Woodham Brothers,
Brothers.
which was the
Yeah.
name everybody knew.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the brothers were his brothers,
Yes.
nothing to do with us.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, so okay. So
So there was different companies. There was Woodham Brothers Limited, there
Yeah.
was Woodham Transport and Woodham Metal, which was the scrap side of it, which is where the trains came in. And then all the trains came in, and then they were pushed aside because the wagons came in and they were worth more money to scrap.
Mhm.
So the trains were pushed aside because nobody was interested in them because they would have all been cut up.
right.
Some were cut up,
Not many,
not many, but,
Yeah.
but then they were put
but they were
aside.
difficult to cut up.
Yeah, but then when the wagons came in,
Mhm.
that's why the trains were pushed aside
Yeah.
to concentrate on the wagons, you know, the big things. And then you had all the preservation societies getting interested in them, and they thought, oh well, you know.
For mountain railways and things like
Yeah, but if anyone wanted to buy one,
Yeah.
he didn't make a profit on them. He sold them for what he bought them for, and it didn't matter how long it took them to get the money. They put a deposit down, and those trains were kept until they could raise the money to buy them.
I mentioned to you that I had people getting in touch with me
Yeah.
because of the thing I got. One
Yeah.
of the stories which I loved was this two blokes from Kevin Cribble
Yeah.
near Bridgend who just like trains were wandering around having a
Yeah.
look, and he had his heart set on this little green locomotive
Yeah.
that he found, and it was like boxed in from
Yeah.
every direction
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
much bigger,
Yeah.
heavier locomotives. And he spoke to your dad, and his dad came and your dad came over to have a look, and he said, how much for that? And he looked at the train, and he looked around at the others, and he said, 60 quid if you can get it out. Why were there so many locomotives that needed to be scrapped in the first place?
This started with the British Railways modernisation programme of, I think, 1955.
Yeah.
But the last steam locomotive was built for British Railways at Swindon Works in 1960. That was a locomotive called Evening Star, which was a very heavy freight locomotive, which would have worked a lot of its time in the South Wales coalfields with many of its class. But after that, there was a progressive rundown of steam. For a variety of reasons. There was the ambition to introduce modern image diesel and electric locomotives, electric traction, the introduction of diesel rail cars on branch lines, but also working steam locomotives. It's a very dirty and highly skilled business. And by the time the 1960s came around, young men weren't willing to work their way up, working in a dirty locomotive shed, cleaning locomotives, shoveling ash, crawling into hot fireboxes, and up a very long ladder to eventually become a fireman and an engine driver. And it took a long time to prepare an engine for steam. You had to drop the fire, service it. It was a lost oil lubrication system, so the fireman and the driver had to crawl around the locomotive, pouring oil into oil cups in very inaccessible places. It required a lot of heavy maintenance and servicing. The boiler had to be flushed out every couple of weeks. The fire was dropped at the end of each working day, and then a new fire had to be built by a firelighter when the engine was ready. And it would take 10, 12 hours to raise steam. So that the availability of the machine was not high. And that pool of dedicated young men willing to work in the railways was dwindling. There were other attractions, better paid.
Yeah, sure. So that was the kind of beginning of the end. Was it? Am I right in thinking there was an act of Parliament that said these engines had to be destroyed, or have I got that completely wrong?
Well, there are two things there. I mean, British Railways in 1968 axed steam altogether, and
Right.
they had they pronounced a steam ban that even preserved locomotives. the handful that were around at that time, notably Flying Scotsman, were not allowed on British Railway metals. Because that was spoiling the image they were trying to cultivate of a modern, unsmoky, ungrimy railway. But the other thing I think you might be referring to is that later on, when preservation societies started trying to buy locomotives, there had been an undertaking between the scrap merchants and British Railways that locomotives would not be sold back into service without paying a premium to British Railways. So the final price would be the scrap value of the locomotive plus VAT plus that levy to British Railways. I guess it was a measure to just see the end of steam altogether.
It all sounds frantic. So what was it like to work at Woodham's?
Right. I started working for Woodham Brothers, who were then known as transport contractors and scrap metal merchants.
Right.
I started working for them in the office as just a typist.
Yeah.
And then gradually as the work progressed, I got busier and busier. And then all these engines became available to buy scrap.
Yeah.
And Dave Woodham bought them as scrap.
Yeah.
But he was so busy with other work coming in,
Yeah.
because he had wagons and all sorts, which he was just scrapping,
Yeah.
that he put the engines to one side.
Right.
Because he didn't have the time to
deal with them.
deal with it.
Wow.
And oh my gosh, and then it all started. And then all the preservation societies became involved because they picked out an engine they were interested in.
Yeah.
They used to come down and they'd negotiate a price for it and they'd buy it. Of course they had to transport it then back to wherever it was going,
Yeah.
which cost a bomb.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all the preservation societies that used to come down to view them and buy different parts of other engines.
Yeah.
So it was an ongoing thing that
It was
got bigger
huge.
and bigger and bigger.
So what did you do? Did you arrange for people to come down, or were you running the office? Well, what was your role?
I ended up as his private secretary.
Oh, right.
And we had a lovely big office overlooking the dock with 3 desks in it, and there was Sylvia, my friend, she became my friend. She worked for nearly as long as I did. She was the bookkeeper, so there was her desk there, there was Dave's there and mine there, and the 3 of us worked in the office together.
Good Lord.
So everyone that came in regarding the Preservation Society, they came into the office, although he did have another sort of an ante-room, which it was like a little lounge, he had a bar there and everything.
Oh, nice.
And they spent quite a few hours, and then they got very, very friendly with them as well.
Yeah.
And that's just evolved, and it went bigger and bigger and bigger.
Because they were big things, weren't they? I mean,
We used to play on them.
Yeah.
I can remember going down on a weekend on Sunday afternoon.
yeah.
Best playground in the world.
Well, and
Quite
again, a
often.
lot of people have said
Yeah.
that they used to they used to
Yeah.
go down with their dad to play on the locomotives.
Yeah.
Used to go from one end to the other without
Yeah.
getting off, up through the
Yeah.
funnel, over the tops,
Oh.
down and then
Yeah.
up through the funnel.
Yeah.
When he was small, couldn't do it now.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But that's what he used to
Be able
do.
to climb now, Paul.
What?
Be able to climb.
And you'd see him making a film, they'd have people sat in the cabs
Yeah.
with their driver's hats on, and they'd be making out the driving the train, and if you were stood behind the cameras filming, there
Right.
wouldn't be any wheels, or the wheels
Yeah.
had been cut in half,
So-
and there'd be a guy with a fire. He'd lit a fire on the side of the engine, he'd be there with the thing
To make it.
the
So
smoke.
they was used for films then, quite a lot, was it? I didn't know
People
that.
making their own films. These were
Oh,
all-
I see. So these are amateur things.
Yeah, they come down and they do all
Ah.
sorts. So it'd look as if they were actually driving a train. Where it was a fire and a guy
Yeah.
with a big bit of cardboard
Yeah.
blowing the smoke. But they
Absolutely
film it so they see the
fantastic.
cab,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there might not even be wheels on
I'll
it.
tell you who had footage of them taking a train away would be the programme Blue Peter, because they bought a train.
Oh gosh,
Right.
yeah.
And they filmed it all where it was being put onto the transport, the low loader,
Yeah.
and they also filmed it being removed from Barry.
So there's
whether
been...
you'd ever be able to get in touch with them and find some footage on that, but they did film it, Blue Peter.
do you know what? I've got in the back of my mind,
Yeah.
I think as a little boy, I actually remember watching that.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember it happening.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot...
It used to be Lawrence used to come and go at that time. Lawrence did a lot. Lawrence on it.
Is that the transporter?
Transporters.
Yeah,
Because I used to work I was working down there in the Scrapyard.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
And I used to watch him come in. Like in,
How much do these things weigh then? Because they can't be that
Oh
easy
my
to move.
God. It would
100
go
tons.
out on, they'd have to have the escorts to take them out of Barry,
Yeah.
and I think they used to go the maximum speed, 3 miles an hour, because of the weight.
Wow.
Huge.
But it was something to see.
Because somebody, another person reached
Yeah.
out to me, said that he used to work at the Weybridge,
Yeah,
and they said it only went up to 100 tons, and he
Yeah.
wasn't sure. I mean, there's a
Wasn't
number
sure.
of readings
I
that
think
say
it depended on
100,
the
because
weight.
that's as
Yeah.
high as it went.
yeah.
So they had to go up Aston Road, and they used to turn right up Buttrell's Hill. But
Yeah.
this driver turned into Tinnywick Road,
Right.
which is steeper. And as he turned round, literally the lorry blew up because of the weight on the back. And they were sticking sleepers under the train because it was breaking off the thing.
So was this lorry transporting the
Yeah.
train?
Yeah,
it
the
literally,
loaders.
so they had to bring in one of these big huge lorries that come up and hitched up and towed the lot to the
Yeah.
top because he thought if it come
Yeah.
off, there was nothing
Yeah.
to stop it going through,
Well, it's quite a hilly place,
through the
isn't
town
it?
road,
Yeah.
through the town wall, which is the town wall.
So the yard was there. Why were there so many locomotives?
Well, there are two things there. I mean, British Railways in 1968 axed steam altogether, and
Right.
they had they pronounced a steam ban that even preserved locomotives. The handful that were around at that time, notably Flying Scotsman, were not allowed on British Railway metals. Because that was spoiling the image they were trying to cultivate of a modern, unsmoky, ungrimy railway. But the other thing I think you might be referring to is that later on, when preservation societies started trying to buy locomotives, there had been an undertaking between the scrap merchants and British Railways that locomotives would not be sold back into service without paying a premium to British Railways. So the final price would be the scrap value of the locomotive plus VAT plus that levy to British Railways. I guess it was a measure to just see the end of steam altogether.
So soon people from all over the country were coming to Barry to buy locomotives, Blue Peter included. Do any other visitors stand out?
Yes, there was an MP from, I can't think of his name. Oh, from Chichester, somewhere down there.
Oh, right, okay.
And I can always remember he came in this one day, and Sylvia, who was the bookkeeper, we used to meet in Barry Dock in the main street,
Yeah.
and then we'd have a taxi then to take us down to the office, and we were brought home by Rolls Royce.
Oh, very nice. I've heard about the Rolls Royce. You must have been honoured then, because he didn't like using it, from what I can gather, except on special.
He did.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
All right, okay.
He used to have his arm out of the window, down his arm out like that, and looking around.
Oh, right, okay.
Oh no, he enjoyed that. He liked going on to his roads. And where was that leading? Oh, and we used to meet in Barry Dock and we'd do a bit of shopping, whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
And we went back to the office this one day. Oh, I wish I could think of his name.
Don't worry about it. The MP from Chichester's good.
I think it's around Chichester
Around that
area.
sort of area,
I
South
think he was
Coast.
a Conservative MP.
In that area, he would almost certainly have been a Conservative MP.
And he said to us, oh, what have you been doing? And we said, oh, we've been doing a bit of shopping. Oh, what have you bought? He said, I'm starving. He said, got anything to eat? And you know, he took some bread off us. He did. And I thought, of all things. I have
I'm glad you can't remember his name.
Preservation Society, Somerset Way.
I met the guy from
Yeah,
the Somerset Railway.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was taxiing over there, and he got in a taxi one night.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
And when
Yeah.
he worked out who I was, and because of the name and that, he
Yeah.
said, oh, come into my house and have a look. And he
Yeah.
had all his model trains in there. and everything.
Fantastic.
You can be anywhere in the world.
When I was in the army, I went sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the doctor, when he read my name out, he said, that name rings a bell. He said, Scrapyard in Barry. And I went, that's about man. Before he looked at my, I spent go for an out talk to him about the Scrapyard before you looked there.
I was on
It's
the.
just weird how you
I was
meet
in
people.
Yeah,
I was in
yeah.
the Maldives, and
Yeah.
they're just little tiny islands.
Yeah.
And we just with the people who were on that island in the island, was talking to somebody, and this guy said, "Oh," he said, "I've been to South Wales." He said, "I go down the Scrapyard, the trains." I said, "Oh, really?" Yeah. He said, and then my husband then was saying, he was on about the trains. He said, "Do you know anything about them?" And he said, "Oh, well, ask her." He said, "That's her father," and that's all where you can be anywhere.
In
the world.
anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world.
Wow.
So what about the man himself, Die Woodham, a name that is synonymous with locomotives all over the world? What kind of a man was he?
He would have people would come down and film
Yeah.
them taking the trains away. And my dad would allow it on one condition,
Yeah.
because he said, "You make a contribution to," there was down Sutherdown, it was the Sunshine Home for Blind Babies.
Oh gosh.
So he said, "Yes, you can come and film,"
Yeah.
because he wouldn't take any money for it. But he said, "You make a contribution to the,
To the blind, the home
Yeah.
for the blind babies.
I think it's gone many years
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
And I can always remember, I was in his office because I used to work on and off for my dad all the time.
Yeah.
And this one company wanted to film. He said yes. He said, "You make your contribution." And they refused. He said, "Well, you don't film then." And he wouldn't allow them to film because they wouldn't make a
Because they wouldn't pay a contribution.
That's right.
He sounds like a man of principles. I mean,
Oh,
you
he
mentioned
was.
you
Yeah.
mentioned he was really firm on
Yeah.
not sending you off to posh schools, and you know, if you're going to give me
Yeah.
money, give it to a charity.
Yeah.
Does that sum him up?
Yes. Yeah.
And where did that come from? Had he always been like that, or is it?
Always. He was just, well, just a normal, everyday person, really.
Yeah.
Sort of day to day, what would go on in the office?
Well, we'd get picked up by taxi and taken to the office,
Yeah.
and then we'd open the post. Sylvia would deal with certain things, I'd deal with others, and then he'd dictate any letters he needed to be sent out.
Yeah.
And then all these letters would come in, and they were always, "Please can we come down to see those so and so and so and so." And that's all I used to do was stamp them, write on it, permission granted,
Yeah.
and my signature.
Right.
That's all I ever
And
did.
that was it.
But it would save him doing anything. But as I said, he could have charged for that
Yeah. Yeah.
if it was £1.
Because
Right.
when he
Right.
first started up, my father would be in working with his men.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't just sat in his office in
Yeah.
those days, he would be out working
Yeah,
all day,
yeah.
every day. It was only later in life that he sort of said he retired. He never retired.
Yeah.
Because once with the compulsory purchase, he moved his office here. Now all we kept was the unit side of it, because all
Yeah.
the scrap businesses had gone by then, and the transport.
Yeah.
So yeah, but he was always working, always. And he, I'd say, get his hands dirty.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, he was a fair boss,
Right.
a hard boss.
Well, let's talk a bit more about him then. And I'm keen to involve him because hopefully knew him better than most. I mean, what you started talking about his early life when he was 14 years old and he jumped ship. Where did he go? Where did that take him?
Oh God.
All over the
All over
place.
the place. And then he joined the army, didn't he? He was
Yeah.
a sergeant in the army. He used to tell us he was always demoted, whether that's true or not, I don't
Right.
know. He used to always tell us stories.
I mean, the one story he told
Um,
was he was in charge of a prison camp in Italy, and
Yeah.
he got demoted because he let them all out for Christmas.
Yeah.
But-
He received the.
So this is during the Second World War then, I assume, if he was in
Yeah,
Italy.
Yeah.
I mean, my father didn't really talk about a lot what he did in the war.
Yeah.
And so
He
after
never
he
met
died,
her.
after he died, my brother John,
Yeah.
we wrote to the War Office to
Yeah.
see if we could get any information, because he was awarded the British Empire Medal
Oh,
for
okay.
active service,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't say why. He didn't like to really talk about things that he saw, and he did see some horrible things
Yeah.
in the Second World War, because he was in France, Italy, everywhere.
Yeah.
And the book came back, and he received his medal for crossing in France and enemy lines to reconnect communications.
Oh wow.
And none of the officers would do it,
Yeah.
so he volunteered. And they said, "Oh, it must probably be a one-way mission," but he went and did it, and connected it, and came back. And he was awarded the British Empire Medal for that. It's all, my brother got the book. He
Right.
has got that book,
Yeah.
and that's what he was awarded the medal for in the war.
Wow. And when he came back from the war, did he go straight into the business?
Straight back to the business.
Mm.
yeah.
And at that point, did he take it over, or was he working for his
He
own
was
dad?
running it then.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, we never knew my grandparents. They were.
Another thing that they used to do, I mean, it got so quiet towards the end, and we'd be 3 of us in the office, and there wouldn't be much to do. And 3 of us used to smoke, and I'd go and make a coffee, or Silver'd go and make a coffee, and he'd get out the Hoover. And he would, honestly, yeah, he did. Now, what boss would do that?
No, I
There were
know.
2
no.
women in the office. I never offered.
Yeah.
Because he did give a train to Barry. It was up on Barry Island for a while.
I got vandalised.
But he got, yeah.
Yeah.
What was it, like a thing for people to play
Yeah,
on?
he
or
just
something?
gave it to him.
Oh, right.
He
Yeah.
gave it to Barry.
Yeah.
But nobody knows where it is now. The last time I went down to the place on Barry Island
Yeah.
where they do the thing, nobody knows what's happened to it.
Yeah, it went. There was a company where the pump house is,
Yeah.
and you've got the sheds there.
Yeah.
They had a little railway society by there. Now he had a couple of trains, but that's all gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they went from there.
It disappears.
Yeah.
Things disappear.
So, but the yard, as in my memory, was unique. You didn't see locomotives anywhere. So why did he keep them all? What was different? What made him do what he
They
did?
were
Because
purely for scrap.
They were for scrap,
They
but
were for scrap.
we started the wagon contract, which
Yeah.
was supposed to be
Yeah.
a little contract that turned out to be massive.
Yeah.
There was no time to cut them up.
Right.
To cut a steam engine up took such a long time.
Yeah.
Plus you had all the asbestos inside it.
Yeah.
It was so complicated
Yeah.
to cut them up.
Yeah.
Where it would take 3 or 4 burners a couple of days to cut one up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The burners would be cutting up 4
Yeah.
wagons a day
Yeah.
each.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where
Yeah. I mean,
It was all
the
about-
rolling stock for the wagons was huge.
Right.
And because every Monday morning we'd be in his car coming down Dockery Road because it overlooked the railway tracks,
Yeah.
and he would go there to see how many wagons he'd coming in because there'd be a big yellow W on the wagon, so he knew what his stock was coming in. But it was massive, the contracts from that.
And that was for breaking them. Yeah, for
That was
breaking.
all for breaking.
And where were they coming from?
Derby. Well, the contracts used to come.
Was it
from
all
Derby.
the British Rail
Yeah.
or
so,
just?
so it was all the coal wagons,
Yeah.
the banana
Yeah.
vans. Remember
Yeah.
the wooden ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You used to see them in fields
Yeah.
everywhere. Farmers
Yeah.
used to buy them to put
Yeah.
their horses in.
Right.
So what you do is you cut the top off the
Yeah.
the banana vans, as they were called, yeah. And then they were sold to a farmer who sold them to all farmers. So
Yeah.
every time you drove around
Yeah.
and you seen a railway van in a field, that
Yeah.
came from
That came-
from the yard.
Yeah.
And then we just cut the bottoms up, and they
Yeah.
would go into the scrap, and away it would be
Yeah.
done.
So why? So all the train stock from the UK was coming to Barry. There weren't other places like
There
this.
were other places,
Oh,
but
right.
I don't know who. But I think he had the biggest
I was gonna say, so they
contract.
clearly can't
So-
have been-
We
I think
were the
someone
ones
else
that I
would.
think that could do it faster
yeah.
than anybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very
Yeah.
dangerous job, one,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
in them days. But
Yeah.
I think they didn't even send people down or sent our burners up to try and teach British Rail how
Yeah.
to do it themselves.
Yeah.
They couldn't do it.
Good lord.
Like they'd have one guy burning, it'd take him a couple of days to cut up one wagon, where our burners were doing 4 a day.
Yeah.
Because I used to sit on the lines with a crane, and as they cut the wagons up, I used to load them into the bins with a crane
Right.
and go.
Yeah.
So we had 1, 2, 3. We had 4 burners working on the west bond.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was one crane used to do the one line, and I used to do the 2. And if he needed, he'd come across and on the second, and then the lorries would come in, put the bins down, and as they cut them up, bump, 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 and they'd be on the next one, the next one.
Yeah. But there were other companies, but I don't know who they are.
Cashmills used to have engines, didn't they?
but
But they cut all theirs up.
Yeah.
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 As you just don't hear that one is hence people knowing about it all over the world. Your dad's place is
Yeah.
so iconic. They just made me wonder. Well,
I
how come
think it's
we-
because of the amount of trains he had there. Because I think
It
there was
wasn't just the
about
pond.
600 trains
Yeah.
altogether.
It wasn't just on that one, yeah, because there was engines up on the
Yeah.
on the tips,
Yeah.
right.
where the old tips used to come
Yeah.
round and used to look
Yeah.
at coal ships. We had I think there was engines on 2 tips as well as
Yeah.
what was in the pond, and then as this engine slowly went, then the engines were brought down. He used to the old diesel shunters used to shunt them around the yard for us because nobody could move them.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course
So
not.
Yeah.
the diesels are shunt them
Yeah.
in. A lot of them were driven in under their own steam.
Yeah. But in a way, it's very lucky that the wagons came in, because otherwise those steam
Otherwise the engines would have
been
gone.
They would have been gone.
Without doubt, the most famous locomotive ever to have left Die Woodham's yard is the one we all recognise today as the Hogwarts Express from the Harry Potter films. It is iconic. What can my guests tell me about that?
What happened was that because of its geographical location and being in the Great Western region, the sort of successor to the Great Western Railway after nationalisation, a lot of ex-Great Western locomotives came to Barry Scrapyard, among them members of the Hall class, which was a 4/6, that's a leading four-wheel bogie and 6 driving wheels, a very common arrangement in this country, and equivalent to something like the LMS Black 5s, a sort of mixed traffic engine that could do both freight or fast freight and passenger work.
Mm-hmm.
So one of these came, and it was one of the preserved ones, Alton Hall. I think Alton actually is up near Birmingham.
Oh, okay.
Which was actually in Great Western Territory just. It was preserved, and then, of course, for the film, rather than being in gleaming Great Western Brunswick green and brass, was painted this very bright red colour, maroon colour for the Hogwarts Express.
Horror.
Yes,
The wrong colours.
but it gains such a terrific cult following, and I'm sure it actually led many youngsters into a fondness for model railways and the full-size thing.
Yeah.
Because of course the model train manufacturers eventually made models of it, which you can see in the shops to this day.
Yeah, a whole new audience. It's
Only audience.
It's a remarkable thing, but I remember telling you that once before that the first time I ever came to Barry, I think I was about 10 years old, with my father, had some business in town, and as we came over the summit of the hill, and then we suddenly had Trinity Street. I know it is now. And of course, from there, you're looking straight down onto this vast area covered in trains. And I was desperate to go, locomotives, perhaps I should say. Although there was rolling stock there too.
There was rolling stock, yeah.
And I just couldn't wait for him to finish what it was we were going to Barry to do, so we could go and look at these trains. And of course, you were allowed to play on them as well. It was it was like paradise. But I'd never seen a locomotive up until that moment. I'd seen pictures of them, but I'd never seen one before. So for my first taste of what a locomotive was, to be allowed to be, standing where the driver stood and looking, it was just absolutely mind-blowing. So if there's a little bit of that being passed on to the new generation because of Harry Potter, then maybe we can forgive the colour, the colour faux pas.
Yeah. If you remove the one like the Harry Potter train, that was one of the big ones.
Yeah.
As I say, the speed going out of town with it was, I think, a maximum of 3 miles an hour.
So how did that come about? Because surely Harry Potter was quite a long time after the yard.
It was. I think they were the Preservation Society bought it.
Oh,
and so they actually done the train up. So it was bought many years before that film.
Yeah.
And I assume the film company were looking for a train, and obviously they'd done it all up, so it was immaculate.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a wreck when it left Barry.
Yeah.
So they've done it all, so it was probably between the person who bought the train, and if I can find the clipping, I can tell you the name of the guy, but I'll have to have a look for it.
Right.
And so obviously that was between them and the film company, nothing to do with Woodham's.
Right. But he was from Woodham's, it came originally.
Yeah.
Do you know how long ago when that happened?
God. I would say 40, 45 years ago maybe. Something like that.
Yeah.
Because how long is Harry Potter been now? 20 years?
It's about 20 years,
over 30, definitely over 35
The only thing I would tell
years.
people, if it wasn't for the old man, Harry Potter would have been going to school on the bus.
Well, exactly.
But you'll be able to find that out through the Echo, because they obviously got
because they cover the archive.
and it will tell you the name of the Preservation Society that actually bought it.
Yeah.
And there was a piece on it coming from Barry to the Preservation Society to Harry Potter.
Oh.
So it'll have the history of it leaving Barry up until the film.
Talk to me about some of these things you brought then. What have you brought there?
The horn is the original, is a guard's horn before they had whistles.
Yeah.
And he sent this off to be auctioned, and it was the only item that
Didn't
that-
sell. No?
it didn't, he put a reserve on it.
Right.
And for some unknown reason, he wouldn't take any other offer unless it reached that reserve. So
Right.
it was going to go back into auction,
Yeah.
and I said to him, I want it. I said, I'll go and get it.
You get that. Go on. No, carry on. Sorry.
So I had to drive all the way back to Tunbridge Wells
Yeah.
to get it. Otherwise it would have gone in the next auction. It would have gone on the next auction.
Fantastic.
But it was the only thing that never sold. The nameplates, the
Yeah.
Barry Castle and
Everything else.
King
All
King
those
Edward
sorts
III or King
Yeah.
George III,
Yeah.
they all sold.
Yeah.
The only other thing that didn't go was a picture of the Ark Royal. And I said to him, I said, I like that, I want that. So I had the two items, which was that
Yeah.
and the,
And the Ark Royal.
and the thing.
Wow.
Now this
And that, yeah.
was written by somebody down the scrapyard. I don't know who
Let me
did
have a
it.
look, I might be able to tell you who done it. Oh no, this was Dad's friends who done that.
He was a friend.
He had a group of friends and they were all into their little music scene, which
Yeah.
was Miriam and Noble. Right?
Okay.
And they'd go down the Barry Commons Club in Station Street
Mhm.
and they'd go dancing. Miriam Noble would be playing.
Playing the
He
piano.
just loved them. If Dad had a party in the house here, Miriam and Noble would come out. Miriam was a piano player.
There used to be
Noble
piano
was on the
player.
drums.
Yeah.
That was his sort of thing. So this was done as a birthday present for him. I can't remember which one. And they're the ones that made up that poem, I suppose you could call it, about
Yeah.
my dad. So they did that, which is about him.
It was on the wall of
Yeah.
his office,
Yeah.
but it was there,
Yeah.
and that the sun
Yeah.
shone on it every day.
Yeah.
There was a south-facing
Yes.
window,
Yeah.
so the sun was there all day, every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Ah, I've just read there's a lovely verse on there, which is, what is the secret of his success? It's been discussed many times around the table. Hard work, probably. Good luck, maybe. Or perhaps he drinks Carling Black Label.
Yeah. Yeah,
He used to
that's...
drink Brains Dark.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, so that was done.
The one
Yeah.
thing I remember, which always has tickled me,
Yeah.
is after he died, our cousin, who's an undertaker,
Oh, gosh,
rang,
yeah.
rang us up and he said, we have a problem. I said, what's that? Mum was sat in the chair in there, I was on the phone. He said, it's the coffin. He said, it's down as a lead-lined coffin.
Mhm.
He said, he's in a brick grave, you don't need a lead-lined coffin. So I showed her, I said, Mum, I said, you don't need a coffin. If he wants a lead-lined coffin, he will have a lead-lined coffin. She won't have it. I said, it's got to be a lead-lined coffin. Right, he said, we can't have a lead-lined coffin. Firstly, nobody will ever be able to pick it up, it's too heavy.
Mhm.
He said, it'll have to be zinc. Can't have lead, Mum's too heavy, zinc? That's okay, as long as it's lined with metal.
Mhm.
So it was a zinc-lined coffin.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody got to know it. And when we were down in the Undertakers, yeah, people were coming in to have a look at the body.
Yeah.
The lid of the coffin was up against the wall.
Yeah.
So people were having a look at the coffin.
Yeah.
And then they do this. To see if it was... and I stood and I was watching and it tickled me.
Yeah, he had a file on his funeral actually.
Oh, right,
Because I
okay.
was working for him and every now and again he said, well, get my file out. I thought, what file's that? He said, my funeral file. I thought, we don't need that. He said, yes. He said, we need it. He said, I'm going this week. I said, no, Dad. And he was dictating some letters to me. And he said, no, we'll do it. He said, yeah. He said, I'm going this week. He said, I've done what I wanted to do now. He said, I've had my 75th birthday,
Mhm.
had the christening, which was John's boy, done that. And he said, I'm going on Friday. And I think this was the Monday. And I said, oh no. He said, get my file out. He said, I must got to check it's all there in place and everything. So I've got his file. He said, yeah. He said, I'm going on Friday. And he went on a Friday.
Good Lord.
So there we have it, Die Woodham Scrapyard, an icon throughout the world, an institution of Barry which touched pretty much everybody who lived here or around here in the 60s, 70s and 80s, and put Barry on the map and gave Harry Potter possibly his best prop. I really hope you've enjoyed this video all about Die Woodham's Scrapyard. And if you have, please feel free to share it on social media, and please, please, please subscribe to this channel. But look, until the next time we meet, enjoy your history.